No one wants to be the weak one. No one wants to be the one who collapses halfway, who's looked down on, who gets left behind. From a young age, we were taught to be strong, but no one ever clearly told us, what does strength really mean? Is it about not crying, not complaining? Is it about enduring, forcing ourselves to tough it out, always standing tall even when we're falling apart inside? We grew up surrounded by warped definitions of what it means to be resilient, and then many started measuring strength by noise rather than quiet perseverance. But there's another kind of strength, quieter, more honest. It's not found in what others can see, but in what you quietly manage to hold on to. It's not found in how well you control others, but in how you refuse to lose yourself. In this video, Stoic App will take you through 7 silent signs that show you don't need to become a strong person, because maybe you already are one. If you've ever stayed true in silence, kept your word to yourself when no one else stayed, leave a comment or just a single dot. Someone out there might need a person like you to keep going. Welcome to Stoic App, where strong people don't shout, they just live true. True strength doesn't need to be seen. At some point in life, each of us has looked in the mirror and asked, am I living too weakly? Because deep down, every human being wants to be strong, not to defeat anyone, but to avoid being left behind, hurt, or looked down upon. We all want to be strong enough not to collapse when life hits. We want to hold ourselves before anyone else has to. But because of that longing, we've too easily believed in the wrong definitions. That being strong means never being weak, that it means being better than others, that it means forcing ourselves to move forward even when we're quietly falling apart inside. We start measuring strength by accomplishments, by how much we can endure, by how dramatic our stories of overcoming adversity sound when retold. But the more we push ourselves to prove it, the more tired we become. The harsher we get with ourselves every time we feel weak. And at some point, we become so exhausted we can't even tell. Are we truly living to be strong, or just trying not to look weak? Strength is not how hard you hit. It's how calm you stay when life hits first. True strength doesn't lie in the punch you throw. It lies in the stillness you keep when life is the one that strikes first. Could it be that true strength isn't something others can see? Could it be that it lives in those quiet choices when you don't need to win, don't need praise, don't need to be admired, only the ability to keep your kindness from going dark? Maybe you've never stepped onto a stage, never been called an inspiration, but you've forgiven when it was easiest to hold a grudge. You've walked away from what's wrong in silence instead of staying to prove you were right. You've kept going, kept getting back up, kept working, kept living, even when no one knew what you were carrying inside. And if there was ever a time you lived like that, then you've already been stronger than you think. Stoic philosophy doesn't glorify loud warriors. It leads you toward awareness, toward self-control, toward dignity, toward the ability to hold on to yourself before you try to hold on to anyone else. To a Stoic, true strength is not betraying your value 7 in pain, even when no one stands with you. You don't need anyone to believe you. You don't need anyone to understand you, as long as your conscience doesn't rise to speak against you. And if there's one reminder worth holding on to every day, it might be the words of Marcus Aurelius: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You don't have to brace yourself to fight the world. You only need to be steady enough not to lose yourself while walking through it. And if you've ever lived like that, even just once, quietly, firmly, without demanding to be understood, then maybe you've already been stronger than you thought. Not because you never fell, but because you got back up and still kept the human part of your heart intact. So today, We'll walk through 7 subtle signs, seemingly smell it quietly, forming the foundation of inner strength. Not to make you try harder to become strong, but to help you realize you may have been strong all along, you just never called it by its name. 1. You don't react immediately. You choose to respond. All of us have, at some point, gone through a moment like this. A sudden criticism, a suspicious look, a misunderstanding so intense it makes you want to scream to the world that you're innocent. Emotions rise, your throat tightens, your palms clench, and in a fraction of a second, instinct shouts, react, push back, don't let them step on you. But then there are people who don't. They don't strike back. They don't explain. They don't rise up to reclaim what's right. They simply stay silent and choose to respond. At the 2022 Oscars, when Chris Rock made a joke about Will Smith's wife who was struggling with medical hair loss, the room burst into laughter, except for one person. Will tried to keep his face straight, but just seconds later, he walked onto the stage and slapped Chris across the face. No one could process what had just happened. Will's anger seemed to have been building for a long time just because of that joke. But from all the times he felt his wife was mocked, his family scrutinized, and his pride wounded. And in that moment, instead of responding, chose to react. He reacted with a slap, a visceral, instinctive act done without thinking, exchanged for millions of judging eyes. And just as the world was fixated on that outburst, Denzel Washington stepped in. He didn't play to the cameras. He didn't act righteous. He simply said one sentence to Will, as if speaking to anyone who's ever let emotion overpower reason. At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. It wasn't a judgment. It wasn't a lecture. Just a deliberate response, spoken from the depths of awareness at the right moment, to the right person at the right depth. He didn't lose control. He didn't follow the crowd. And that's exactly why his words made everyone stop and reflect. Reaction is instinct, but response is strength. When you're hurt, instinct wants you to lash out. When you're insulted, instinct wants you to defend. When you're misunderstood, instinct wants you to fire back. But precisely because it's instinct, it's also the easiest thing to manipulate. A manipulator doesn't need to yell to break you. They just need to poke the right wound, the right pride, the right insecurity inside you, so that you explode, react, lash out, and lose yourself. Stoic philosophy doesn't demand that you become a cold machine. It simply helps you see emotions are allowed to come, but not all emotions are worthy of being acted on. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You have control over your mind, not over what happens around you. Realize that, and you'll find strength. Because a truly strong person isn't someone who never gets angry. It's someone who stares straight into that anger and chooses not to let it control their hands. Ryan Holiday, the modern voice of Stoicism's, once publicly attacked on live television. The host sneered, "Don't you think you're profiting off Stoicism? You're turning ancient philosophy into a tool to sell books to the weak." The whole room waited to see how Ryan would react, but he didn't get angry. He didn't fire back. He didn't defend. He simply looked at the host for a few seconds, then gently replied, "I write for those who are in pain. If my book can help just one person walk through their darkness, then all the noise doesn't matter." He didn't try to win. He didn't need to prove himself. He just held firm to his values and let the rest fall away. Response is not weakness. It's the choice of someone who knows what they're holding on to, what they're protecting, and what they're refusing to carry. And you don't need to be a sage to do that. You just need to start with 3 seconds. 3 seconds of breath before replying to a message that heats your blood. 3 seconds of pause before saying something that might hurt someone. 3 seconds to ask yourself, am I responding from truth or just my ego? If you want to build true strength, practice that one small habit every day. Nothing grand, just enough awareness not to be pulled, just enough calm not to be manipulated, just enough self-mastery to not need victory yet never feel defeated. Because sometimes the thing that makes you the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest voice, isn't the authority. It's the unshakable calm no one else can move. And the question for you is, will you dare to choose calm when the whole world wants you to lose control? 2. You face fear and a harsh life head-on. Some turning points in life come without warning. No thunder from the sky, just a call from HR. A meeting request with no reason, a glance that won't meet your eyes, and then you know you're on the list. That year, the global economy was in crisis. Company after company announced closures, downsizing, restructuring. I always thought of myself as a dedicated employee, long time, scandal-free, but in a crisis, no one is safe. That morning, I stared at my termination notice, holding a cup of cold coffee. No anger, no tears, just a vague feeling. The world had changed color and I didn't have a ticket back in. The weeks that followed were aimless. I tried rewriting my CV, tried mustering the spirit to apply, but the more I scrolled through job listings, the more lost I felt. Over 40, a degree from an unknown school, a skill set that had only ever been good at what I did, but now that was no longer enough. One job posting made me stop longer than the rest. A big company, not a high position, but right in my area of expertise. I read it again and again, and then laughed to myself. Well, why not? What do I have left to lose? Maybe because of that mindset, I felt lighter. No expectations, no need to prove anything. Just going as someone who had grown weary of this shore, needing to know if there was land waiting on the other side. The interview took place in a bright office. The interviewer, a young man, probably just a few years older than my son. He asked thoroughly, but not coldly. Until the final question, when he looked at me for a while and asked, "I see you were let go from your last job. Why do you think I should hire you?" I don't know why I didn't rush to defend myself. Maybe I had nothing left to hide. Maybe I had learned that perfect answers are no longer what keeps you alive, they're what make you lose yourself. I looked him straight in the eye and said slowly, "I used to think I had a stable place in life, but that fall taught me this. If I don't relearn how to begin, I won't survive. I'm not the candidate in this room, but I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know I'll cherish any new opportunity more than anyone else." The air in the room grew heavy, not from emotion, but because the truth, even when fragile, always carries weight. A week later, I got a call. I got the job, not because I was better than anyone else, but maybe because I was honest at a moment when no one had asked me to be. The truth is, fear doesn't vanish. It doesn't dissolve when you do all the right steps. It stays sitting beside you, following you, whispering in your ear that you're not enough. But if you only listen to it, you'll stay stuck. You'll keep writing, then deleting emails, opening, then closing job tabs, dreaming, and then backing away. And that's when I understood why Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to be fearless. It teaches you to move even when you're still afraid. Epictetus once said, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are. There is no greater test than the fear inside you, and no other way through but through." Hardship doesn't come to stop you. It comes to teach you how to walk through storms. If you're afraid, don't try to suppress it. Just write it down. What is holding you back? What are you afraid of? Not because it's too hard, but because you're afraid of failing in someone else's eyes. Write it down, then do one first thing. Something small, but real. An email, a question, an action that lets you know you are moving forward even while trembling. I'm not saying I was the best. Maybe in that round of interviews, there were younger, smarter people with better resumes than mine. But I dared to walk into the room I once feared. I didn't let fear choose for me. I chose to get up. I chose to try. And because of that, I won. Not over those who were better than me, but over the weight that sat on my chest. I realized there is no fear that can't be overcome if you dare to face it. No life that's truly over if you still have the courage to begin again. And if I could do it, so can you. Not because you're stronger than others, but because you're brave enough to keep walking even before you feel ready. And the question for you is, what's holding you back when you know the life you want is waiting on the other side? 3. You dare to take responsibility instead of shifting blame. When was the last time you said, "I was wrong," without adding a single excuse? Not to be forgiven, not to make anyone happy, but because you understood, if you don't take ownership of your part, you're no longer truly yourself. David was a man who had outgrown the days of sitting in meetings blaming broken processes or delays from another department. He was a mid-level project manager, not a star, not a leader, not someone who inspired others. But that day, when the project was delayed by 2 weeks, a major client started pulling out, and the boss called an emergency meeting to assign accountability. David did something no one else in the room dared to do. He could have said he reminded the tech team multiple times, had emails to prove it, clear timelines, legitimate reasons for everything. But he chose not to. After the meeting, David sent a short email. No circles, no self-credit, no defense. Just one honest line. I was the one assigned to track progress. I saw signs of delay, but didn't act decisively enough. This is on me. I've redesigned the entire workflow to prevent this from happening again. Here's my proposal. He wasn't fired. He wasn't praised either. But the next day, the head of engineering, a man everyone avoided for his bluntness and cold demeanor, called David directly and said just one thing. "Thanks for throwing my team under the bus. Next week, if anything's urgent, just say it. I'll prioritize." And David realized something no one had ever taught him. The strength of a man doesn't lie in how well he defends himself, but in the courage to face his part in the failure and act to fix it even when no one asked him to. We often think apologizing is weakness. It's bowing down. It's losing face. But in truth, only the weak avoid apologizing because they're afraid of shedding the shell that protects them from the truth. The strong don't need that shell. The strong are quiet enough to face their mistakes without justification. They respect themselves too much to keep living in denial. They know that if they don't hold on to their own dignity, then even if they hold on to their title, it'll be hollow. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be perfect. It teaches you to master yourself. And sometimes, mastery isn't about rising above others, it's about stopping at the right moment to say sorry. Not because you're weaker, but because you're strong enough not to betray what you know is right. No blame, no overcompensation, no performance. A Stoic isn't always right, but they never dodge the truth. They don't seek forgiveness from the crowd, only one thing, that their conscience never turns its back on them. That's how Jocko Willinka, former Navy SEAL officer, chose to live. After a failed mission nearly cost lives, Willink stood before his team and said, "It was my fault." He didn't blame bad intel, didn't blame subordinates, didn't blame a sudden change in weather. He said directly, "I didn't blame intel. I didn't blame confusion. I didn't blame anyone. It was my fault." And when you take ownership, you gain power. For Willink, owning the failure didn't make him smaller, it made him larger. And in the military, where life and death can hinge on a single decision-taking, responsibility isn't a moral act. It's the standard of real leadership. If you're carrying a mistake right now, don't wait for someone else to call it out. Don't wait for the fallout to explode. Write it down. No need to post it. No need for anyone to read it. Just make sure you know and begin to fix it. No grand gesture. No need to send the email. No need for a pat on the back. Just an action from a man who's done with the defensive life and wants to live a different way. No hiding, no blaming, no running, just living as if every act you take is a declaration of character. If you've ever had a moment like that, where you truly owned your mistake, didn't deflect, didn't mask it, share it in the comments. Because maybe your story will be a quiet light for someone still lost in the fog of their own regret. Do you dare to look directly at what you've been blaming and turn it into your responsibility? 4. You adapt to survive, but you don't lose who you are. Have you ever changed just to survive, and yet managed to keep a part of yourself intact as it was in the beginning? We don't live in a gentle world. Life doesn't let us keep everything we love, or chase to the end everything we once started. There are moments when you're forced to pivot, not because you're weak, but because the people you love need you to stay alive. There are moments you must adapt, not because you want to, but because if you don't, you'll be left behind. But through all the changes, the most important question remains: what have you managed to keep? I thought about that question while reading the story of Matthew McConaughey, of the most famous Hollywood stars of the early 2000s. He was the face of romantic comedies, charming, bankable, a golden image. But after nearly a decade of playing the same roles, McConaughey realized he was living a highly paid illusion. He was being hired to maintain an image, not to live honestly. And one day, he disappeared. No announcement, no explanation. For 3 years, Hollywood didn't see him. Producers didn't know what was going on. Rumors spread. McConaughey's spiraling. His career is over. But the truth had pulled himself out of a race he no longer wanted to run. He turned down every easy script, went back to study acting, read through hundreds of small scripts, auditioned for films no one had heard of, for one reason only. He wanted to live truthfully, even if it meant starting again from zero. He chose to vanish from the spotlight, to rediscover the light within. And then, in 2013, he returned not as Mr. Dreamboat, but as Ron Woodroof in Dallas Buyers Club, a gaunt, abrasive man battling AIDS and a broken medical system. McConaughey lost over 40 pounds, lived as the character, and delivered a performance that left the world silent. He won an Oscar. But perhaps the greatest reward wasn't the gold statue. It was that he had held to himself. In his Oscar speech, he said, "I didn't change who I was. I just stopped pretending I was someone I wasn't." It sounded like a declaration, but really, it was the simplest truth of a man who had to choose between living true and living easy. And he chose what was true. Stoicism doesn't teach us to stay the same. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything's destiny is to change, to be transformed. So let it be, and let your nature grow." Everything born must change and be transformed. Let it happen, and let your nature grow through that change. But Stoicism also teaches that there is a part of you, your dignity, your faith, your principles that must never be traded just to fit in. You can take a different job, live in a different city, be around different people, but if you start saying things you don't mean, living a life that isn't yours, smiling each day just to avoid disapproval, what you lose isn't your status, it's your soul. You don't have to cling to your childhood dream, But you do need to hold on to the part of you that doesn't lie. You can stop painting, but still see the world through an artist's eyes. You can close an old book, but don't ever throw away the pen that's still writing. Because if you lose the thing that makes you feel alive, you may keep living, but it won't be as yourself. And if today you feel like you're changing too much to please someone else, pause. Write down 2 things. First, what you're forcing yourself to change. Are you doing it because you've grown, or because you feel like you no longer fit in this world? Second, what is one thing in you, a value, a habit, a belief that you will never let anyone, not even yourself, erase? Because in the end, Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to reject the world. It only asks you not to lose yourself while walking through it. You can adapt to survive, but never forget, not every transformation is growth. Some of them are quiet betrayals of the soul. Are you growing, or just changing because you're afraid they won't like you anymore? 5. You live with kindness but with clear boundaries. You are not strong because you're kind to everyone. You're strong when you know exactly when to stop. Because true strength doesn't lie in how many people you help, but in whether you lose yourself while helping them. A grown man doesn't wear kindness as armor. He's kind because that's how he chooses to live. But he has principles, he has boundaries, and there's a place deep within him that no one is allowed to cross, not even in the name of needing help. I once heard a story that few people tell, but to me, it quietly reveals everything about a man who lives kindly, with boundaries. When Abraham Lincoln was still a poor lawyer, he once helped an elderly farmer reclaim a small plot of land that had been wrongfully taken by the local government. He charged nothing, did all the legal paperwork himself, and man kept his land. Everyone praised Lincoln. They called him a good man. A few years later, that same man returned, this time not to protect land, but to take a piece from his neighbor. Still about land, still within legal reach, still a case Lincoln could have easily won. But Lincoln declined. He simply slid the papers back across the table and said, "I helped you keep what was yours, not to teach you how to take what belongs to someone else." No shouting, no grand moment. But in that quiet instant he taught that man, and all of us, that kindness without wisdom will eventually become a tool for greed. And that sometimes stopping is the kindest thing you can do for your own conscience. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be cold. It teaches you to be clear. It teaches you to ask, what you're giving, does it truly heal? Or is it feeding something else like dependence, manipulation, or quiet contempt? A strong man never lets his kindness be twisted into a tool for being liked, for keeping the peace, or for avoiding conflict. He doesn't flinch when he has to say no. He's not ashamed to withdraw his support from places that no longer deserve it. And he doesn't over-explain because he knows. Boundaries don't need to be understood. They just need to be honored. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others, but strict with yourself." And maybe part of that strictness is not being careless with your kindness. You don't let others cast you as the hero just because you can endure. You live kindly not to earn applause, but because you respect the quiet rules that make you who you are. And when someone crosses that line, you don't need to get angry. You just step back, steady enough for them to understand you're not someone they'll get to use again. If this week brings a request that makes you uneasier, vague favor, a responsibility that isn't clear, a situation where your kindness feels stretched too far, stop, write a refusal, send it, not to prove you're tough, but to protect the part of you that's been handed out too often in the wrong places. You don't live kindly to be admired. You live kindly because you understand the real value of kindness, a value that only survives when paired with self-respect. Don't let others define you by what they expect from you. Let them know your kindness isn't something anyone can just access because it doesn't come from weakness. It comes from a heart strong enough to know when to give and when to hold back. Are you helping because you want to help, or because you're afraid to be rejected, afraid to disappoint, afraid of being called the bad one? And if you've ever been hurt by your own kindness, just leave a single dot, just one. Anyone who's been there will know you were never alone. 6. You choose what's right, even if it means facing loneliness. Have you ever known exactly what was right, but still hesitated because you knew if you did it, you'd be left out? No one says it out loud, but you can feel it. That if you speak up, you'll be seen as the troublemaker. That if you say no, you'll be cut from the game. That if you stand your ground, you'll stop being the chosen one. Not because you're wrong, but because you refuse to stay silent. Strong people aren't always the ones getting applause. Sometimes they're the ones walking out of the room full of applause because they realize that applause was for something wrong. There was a man once faced with such a choice. He was a mid-level manager at a major real estate company. After nearly a decade of loyal service, he was nominated for a promotion vice director, double the salary, a private car, and a scholarship slot at an elite school for his daughter. But there was a catch. To preserve strategic relationships, he had to approve a project that had already been flagged for violating urban planning laws and harming the surrounding community. They told him, just sign it. Everything else is already taken care of. He said nothing in the meeting, but that night he sat for hours by his sleeping daughter's bed. He remembered her asking once, "Dad, is it hard to be a good person?" And in that quiet, he knew he couldn't sign. Not because he feared being wrong, but because he knew, if he did, he'd no longer have the courage to look his daughter in the eye and teach her how to live with integrity. The next morning, he withdrew from the nomination. No blame, no scandal, just said, "I'm not aligned with this direction." He was reassigned, lost the opportunity, lost the admiration of those who only define success by titles. But he kept something no one could take away, his inner peace. A few years later, when the project was investigated, everyone who had patted his back was under scrutiny. He was the only one untouched. But that wasn't the reward. The real reward was the years he got to live as a man who never had to explain why his silence felt right. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be a martyr. It teaches you one simple thing: live rightly even if you have to stand alone. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Because sometimes holding on to your own truth means losing comfort with others. And you have to choose. If you're doing something right now that your conscience knows is wrong, write it down. Don't blame the environment, the system, or the pressure. Then write one thing you'll dono, matter how small, that brings you closer to what you truly believe in. No one has to see it. No one has to understand. Just make sure you don't have to go to war with yourself. Because in the end, the real question isn't, what do people think of me? It's, can I keep living without looking down on myself? And if you've ever held your ground in a moment like that, remind yourself, you were stronger than many who once stood in the spotlight. Are you living through the eyes of others or through the voice of your own conscience? 7. You persevere, stay steady, and live responsibly with yourself. No one sees how hard you try. No one sees the mornings you wake up before dawn, the nights you lie awake with a dream still unfinished, or the moments you almost quit, but clenched your fists and kept going. There's no applause, no reminder, no glory waiting behind the door. But you still do it, because you understand no one else will live your life for you. No one will take responsibility for an abandoned path. No one will hand you back a dream if you were the one who quietly walked away from it. True strength, sometimes, lives in that very thing. You keep a promise to yourself, not because someone's watching, but because you know, if you give up, you'll be the first to face the disappointment in the mirror. David Goggins was once a night shift worker, overweight, sluggish, ashamed of himself. He did a monotonous job, ate donuts daily, and ran from everything that made him feel weak. Until one night, he caught a program about the Navy SEALs, the world's most elite soldiers. And in that moment, he saw the truth. No one had dared to say to him, "I've become a coward not because someone beat me, but because I surrendered to myself." From that moment, Goggins began to change, not to become a hero, but to keep one silent vow to himself. "I will never run away again." He started running at night with heavy legs and sleepless eyes. He lost over 100 pounds in 3 months, relearned all his academics to qualify for SEAL training, failed twice, suffered injuries, got rejected but didn't quit. On his 3rd attempt, he entered Hell Week, the most brutal military training in America. He fractured bones in his legs, but he finished quietly. No one knew. No one called his name. But Goggins knew. Every step he ran was one more step pulling himself out of the darkness that once devoured him. And today, even after becoming a speaker, author, and global inspiration, Goggins still runs, still wakes at 4 a.m., still trains at the extreme every single day, not to impress, but so he never betrays the man he once promised. "We will never live the old way again," Marcus Aurelius once wrote. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And if you're walking quietly through pain, through limits, through days no one understands, then maybe you're already on that path. Not everyone who shouts is moving forward, and not everyone who's silent is standing still. Stoicism doesn't teach you to win for validation. It teaches you to remain committed to yourself even when no one claps, even when no one sees. It teaches you to keep going, not because you've never fallen, but because you remember exactly why you stood back up. You don't need to share every effort online. You don't need anyone's approval to know you have worth. You only need to remember why you keep going, and hold that promise day after day, even when the world doesn't ask. So what are you staying committed to that only you know? What are you pushing through, though no one sees? Write it down. Don't let it be forgotten, because that's where true strength begins. You've just walked through 7 signs. Seemingly ordinary, yet quietly piecing together the kind of strength that's built from within. No need to beat anyone. No need to be the best. Just hold on to your values every time life tries to pull you away from them. Maybe you've never been recognized. No one has ever named the quiet efforts you carry. But if you've ever chosen silence over rage, ever kept walking when no one noticed, ever kept a promise to yourself on nights that nearly broke you, then believe this: you're already stronger than many who shout about strength. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to live true. And if you're still walking that path, don't leave this place. Because Stoic app will continue bringing you content that awakens, sharpens, and strengthens the very core of who you're becoming. Leave a comment, something you once told yourself to not give up, a single dot, or a truth you're still holding on to. Someone out there might need to see you, to keep going. Don't forget to subscribe to Stoic app, because here we don't teach you how to become strong. We simply remind you, you've always been stronger than you thought.